They're a big part of the reason my Greek-American constituents in Delaware sometimes refer to me as the man sitting behind you, Father, who helped me my very first campaign directly behind you. The nickname I got early on when I won by 3,200 votes for the Senate seat when I was 29 years old. Is because I started calling me Joe Bidenopoulos because, oh, you think I'm kidding. I'm not joking, am I? I'm not joking because of the overwhelming support from the Greek American community.
This is my first video update from Belgrade, Serbia on this Thursday morning. Let's talk about some news. And we are going to have to talk about de-dollarization and trade that is taking place outside of the USD. Because over the past couple of days, there have been so many deals that have been made outside of the US dollar that I can't really keep up. I just can't track them all, to be honest. It's really incredible what is happening and how quickly the rest of the world outside of the collective West is moving away from the US dollar. And to a certain degree, they are embracing the Yuan. And so I've got a bunch of articles and headlines and tweets that I've bookmarked, which I will read to you with all of the big news of all of the big trades outside of the US dollar. So let me get to the other side of the street. And we'll read those articles and those tweets. And the big one, which was announced yesterday, was China and Brazil, and then you also had Saudi Arabia joining the SCO. Djokovic. So let's walk to the main square, and we'll talk about all of these big deals that are going down while the Biden White House is completely obsessed and consumed with Project Ukraine. All right. It's a beautiful day here in Belgrade. I am very blessed to have come here and to have such nice weather here in the fabulous city of Belgrade. So let's get talking about all the deals that are going down. So Brazilian companies will no longer need to use the dollar to export their products to China. That's a big deal. That is a big deal. And it's all going to be done, I believe, in Yuan, if I'm not mistaken, thanks to an agreement signed between the two central banks. Brazilian banks will also be able to connect to the Chinese payment system. So a lot of this stuff was going to be signed with Brazilian President Lula's trip to Beijing, but that trip had to be canceled or at least delayed because, from what I understand, Lula had pneumonia. He became ill with pneumonia. So that trip has been delayed, but they are still signing deals. And all of these deals are with Chinese payment systems and the Yuan, and all of it is outside of the USD. Saudi Arabia and China will build a $12 billion plus oil refinery. Saudi Arabia has agreed to receive Yuan loans under the Silk Road Organization for International Cooperation, the BRI, for the construction of infrastructure projects especially Neoma, a futuristic city. China completes the first Yuan-settled LNG deal. A deal for 65,000 tons of liquefied natural gas was concluded between China's CN, OOC, and French oil and gas company Total Energies, France. LNG was delivered to China from the UAE. Even the French are are moving away from the USD. Oh boy. Earlier this week, a meeting took place in Moscow between Iran, Russia, Syria, and Turkey. Rapprochement between Turkey and Syria. Reuters is reporting, and this is the big news, that Riyadh has joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Saudi Arabia's cabinet approved on Wednesday a decision to join the SCO as Riyadh builds a long-term partnership with China despite U.S. security concerns. Saudi Arabia has approved a memorandum on granting the kingdom the status of a dialogue partner in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO, according to state news agency SPA. The SCO is a political and security union of countries spanning much of Eurasia, including China, India, and Russia. Brazil and China strike trade deal agreement to ditch US dollars. China overtook the United States as Brazil's top trading partner in 2009. Brazil and China have entered into an agreement to abandon the US dollar in favor of their own currencies in trade and financial transactions. The new agreement is expected to reduce costs and encourage greater expansion of bilateral trade and facilitate investments. Let's walk to the square. Nice and sunny on the main square here in Belgrade. How about this one? China is the world's #1 manufacturer of cars and the #2 exporter of cars. And China's #1 customer is Russia. Let's see here if I've got some tweets bookmarked. So this happened 5-6 days ago, but I haven't mentioned it in a video, so I'll mention it now. Chad nationalized assets belonging to ExxonMobil. That was an interesting story. We had Kenya as well, announcing that they're going to be trading outside of the USD. Right now, Kamala Harris is in Africa trying to win Africa over, but she's not doing it with talk of trade and business. She's doing it lecturing countries like, I believe, Ghana, lecturing them about various human rights, alphabet stuff. They sent Kamala Harris to stop the bleeding. The globalists sent Kamala Harris. The Biden White House sent Kamala to Africa to stop the slide. Oh boy. How about this tweet from Zeke? Ooh, check mark. 20 years ago, Saudi-US trade was almost 5 times Saudi-Chinese trade. Now Saudi-Chinese trade will soon be 4 times Saudi-US trade. Saudi Arabia's accession into the SCO and possibly BRICS Plus in August will only accelerate the dollar to yuan trend. BRICS Plus. Get used to that name, BRICS Plus. What else here from Donbas Debushka? A banquet in Iraq brought together Syria, Iran, and Saudi ambassadors. in the Iranian embassy in Baghdad. So Iraq is now jumping on the multipolar train. Let's see what else we have. From CNBC, Saudi Arabia takes a step to join China-led security bloc as ties with Beijing strengthen. SL Kempfen, the tweet says, this should be front page news on CNN and BBC. China is now buying natural gas, LNG, from the Middle East using Yuan. UAE, one of the biggest allies of the US, is quietly allowing de-dollarization. However, this is not 2003. UAE is not Iraq, and MBS is not Saddam Hussein. When Xi Jinping was in Saudi Arabia, he encouraged Arab leaders to use Shanghai to sell oil in Yuan by 2025, but things are apparently accelerating even faster than one can imagine. How about this tweet from Colin Rugg? New: Saudi Arabia has inked an 80 billion yuan deal with China to build a Chinese oil refinery. Are you paying attention yet? Our adversaries are teaming up. China is loading up on gold. China and Russia have penned their alliance. China has mediated a peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is considering accepting yuan instead of the US dollars. Instead of the US dollar, our adversaries want to crash our economy, and the US dollar is on the path to lose its world reserve currency status. All this in just 2 years of a Joe Biden presidency. Buckle up. I agree with everything he's saying here, except the fact that our adversaries want to crush the US dollar. I would phrase that differently and said the Biden White House forced these countries to move outside of the US dollar. They had no other choice, especially Russia, and Vladimir Putin said this last weekend in an interview that he gave to Russian state media. He said that we would gladly trade in the US dollar, but Joe Bidenopolis, Greece, his favorite son, doesn't allow us to trade in USD. So we're going to look towards China and the yuan. Oh boy, let's do one more tweet. Gonzalo Lira, he says that yes, Russia's exports remained unaffected by Western sanctions, but now those exports are sold in currencies other than the dollar or the euro, which is catastrophic for Western economies that are over-indebted and need foreigners to buy their debts. And this was in reply to a tweet from SL Kempfen, who said, Russia's exports have remained almost unaffected by the US-EU sanctions. Here are some charts for exports of Russian crude oil, petroleum products, LNG, and coal. The rest of the world sees through Western propaganda plus pure economics and need for energy. The message from the global South to the imperialists about the Ukraine war: your monkey, your circus. Well said. Well said. De-dollarization. It's moving a lot faster than I think any of us would have ever possibly imagined. Good job, Joe Bidenopolis. Really good job. Sergei Lavrov and Dmitry Peskov, they said some stuff about the proxy war in Ukraine. And let me start with what the Kremlin spokesman said. He said that Russia and the West face a long-term fight. He said, as far as war in the broad definition of the word, as a confrontation between hostile and unfriendly countries, Peskov stated that the hybrid war unleashed against Russia by the West is bound to last for a long time. Here we need firmness, self-confidence, purposefulness, and unity around the president in order to succeed. And what Peskov is talking about, I don't think he's really talking about the fact that the war in Ukraine, the actual proxy war in Ukraine, is going to last a long time. Maybe it will, but what Peskov really means is just this wider war, the economic war, the war in Ukraine, the war in other fronts that could be opening up, say Moldova, say Georgia, say Syria. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe Iran, Taiwan, China. What Peskov means in the statement is that this fight between the multipolar and the unipolar, between the global South and the collective West, is going to last a long time. And I agree with that statement from Peskov. Here is what the excellent Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov said. He said that NATO is fighting on Kiev's side. NATO countries are now de facto fighting on the side of Kiev and have become deeply drawn into the Ukraine conflict, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Wednesday. Quote, once again, we drew attention to the subversive line of the NATO countries, which have been drawn into the conflict for a long time and are getting drawn into it deeper. And in fact, they are fighting on the side of the Kiev regime, Lavrov said during a press conference following talks with Iranian counterpart Hossein Amirabdollahian in Moscow. He also noted that the West no longer wishes to stop the conflict in Ukraine and is instead working to prolong it. Lavrov pointed to a recent statement made by U.S. Secretary of State Blinken, who claimed that any ceasefire or truce proposed by Moscow could not be allowed because it would only be in the interests of Russia. Lavrov said, it is difficult for me to say what such a shallow, frankly speaking, analysis is based on. The only assumption is that the West does not want to stop the war and sees its own geopolitical interests in this war, primarily from the point of view of its attempts to eliminate another competitor on the world stage in the face of the Russian Federation. I love how Lavrov calls Blinken's comments shallow. Very diplomatic use of words there from one of the top diplomats. You know, the problem that is now confronting the Biden White House and the collective West is that they have made this conflict in Ukraine existential for their survival. And I'm not talking about the survival of the American citizen, of the United States, the people of the United States. De-dollarization is existential for the survival of the globalists, of the elite class, of the NGOs, of the venture capitalists, of the US-funded universities and think tanks in DC and think tanks abroad and the neocons and the NEDs and the projects for a new American century or whatever they've been rebranded as, the Lincoln Project or whatever. De-dollarization, this is existential for them. America's going to be fine. I believe the people of the US, and Alexander has said this in many videos that we've done on the Duran, the US, the people of the US are going to be better off when the US government is forced to focus on the United States and on making the United States a great place to live for its people, focusing on Americans and the lives of Americans instead of all of these adventures that they take part in overseas. What de-dollarization is going to do, though, is that it's going to suck out the funding of the think tanks and the DC elite and the NGOs and universities and regime change operations and color revolutions and all of this stuff. So it's become existential for the globalists, for the WEF, for all of these guys, for Klaus Schwab. So now the conflict in Ukraine is about their very survival. It's about how they make money and how they fund themselves. That's what's happened now. So it's existential, not only for Russia, but it's become existential for Biden, Ursula, and the people that control more importantly, the people that control Biden and Ursula von der Crazy. The Congress, they're trying to figure out where all the money has gone in Ukraine that the U.S. has sent to Ukraine. They say it's 113 billion. I think it's probably a lot higher than that. But they're trying to figure out where has all the money gone. And the answer to that question is that the money has gone to the military-industrial complex. That's where all the money has gone. Most of the money the U.S. Congress has designated for aiding the government in Kiev has actually gone to the military-industrial complex, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee admitted during an oversight hearing on Wednesday. Of the 113 billion appropriated across 4 supplementals, approximately 60% is going to American troops, American workers, and on modernizing American stockpiles, the military-industrial complex, said Representative Michael McCall, a Texas Republican. In fact, only 20% of the funding is going directly to the Ukrainian government in the form of direct budgetary assistance. McCall, a staunch supporter of arming Ukraine, insisted that his oversight of the aid is not intended to undermine or question the importance of support for Kiev, but to let American taxpayers know how their money was being spent. What else did McCall say here? The witnesses at Wednesday's hearing on oversight, transparency, and accountability of Ukraine assistance included the acting or permanent inspectors general at the Pentagon, the State Department, and the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. The trio was featured in a Wall Street Journal report last month about American auditors going into Ukraine to ensure the weapons, equipment, and cash are not diverted for unintended use. They told McCall on Wednesday that so far there haven't been any substantiated instances of diverting U.S. aid because it's all going to the military-industrial complex. So 20% of it is going to meet Ukraine's budget needs, which means that 15% of the 113 billion is going into the pocket of Zelensky, and maybe 5% is going to everything else, to the actual people of Ukraine, if that. The rest of the money is going to the military. Every dollar counts, said McCall, arguing the oversight would promote the efficiency and effectiveness of Ukraine funding in service of U.S. interests. He also noted that the multinational consulting company of Deloitte is working with Ukrainian government to verify the expenditure of U.S. cash sent to prop up Kiev's budget. I don't think the U.S. has ever been engaged in anything quite like this, McCall said later in the hearing, referring to the pipeline of NATO weapons headed to Ukraine through Poland. That's good to know, that the U.S. has never been engaged in anything like this. Good to know that the Biden White House is overseeing something that the U.S. has never been engaged in before. So who's making the money? It's the MIC. They're top of the list. Then Zelensky and his production staff and his script writers, and then way down on the bottom, the people of Ukraine. Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner Group, he described Ukraine's losses in the battle for the city of Bakhmut, as almost fatal to Kiev's entire military. The sacrifices made by his force for the sake of Russia were worth it, he added. As of today, the battle for Bakhmut has almost destroyed the Ukrainian army, Prigozhin said in a statement on Wednesday, using the name by which Kiev calls the city. The clash also gave a serious beating to PMC Wagner, he acknowledged. He called the battle the general engagement of the entire conflict and said that in it, Wagner troops got pitted against Ukrainian armed forces and foreign units installed into them. A victory by his troops would be a turning point in a historic event, securing a Russian victory, Prigozhin predicted. The Russian army alone will be left on the chessboard, and all other pieces will be removed, he forecast. Even if PMC Wagner is destroyed in the Bakhmut meat grinder, but takes the Ukraine army with it, it would mean that we have accomplished our historic mission. That is quite a statement from Prigozhin. You know, sometimes Prigozhin is spot on. Sometimes, he's hit or miss. He's definitely an excellent social media troll. He understands how to use social media to troll his adversaries, but every now and then Prigozhin does say things which are very, very accurate. This is a very interesting statement from Prigozhin. Even if Wagner is destroyed, they're going to take the Ukraine army with them. And that is something that the Collective West media and the leaders of the Collective West try to hide from the people of the Collective West, which is that right now you are looking at the Wagner group, these PMCs, highly trained, very capable, very tough PMCs taking on NATO and a NATO proxy army, and they're grinding the NATO proxy army down. They may also be suffering terrible losses, but they're destroying a NATO army. They're demilitarizing NATO. They're demilitarizing a NATO proxy army. That is incredible. That is incredible. And NATO is absolutely panicked about this fact. That is why they are trying so hard to cover it up and to make it seem like it's the entire Russian military that's fighting in Bakhmut. The entire Russian military, the rest of the entire Russian military is waiting until that chessboard is cleared, as Prigozhin said. And then the Russian military, they're going to be the only ones left on that board. A very interesting statement from Prigozhin. So let's do a couple of clown worlds, and we'll wrap this video up. Biden's having his democracy summit. Oh no, he finished his democracy summit. This is the second year of Biden's video virtual Zoom call democracy summit, where he invites a bunch of countries that the United States considers to be democracies, and they talk about democracy and human rights. And I believe it was from the 28th until today, so I believe it's wrapping up. The Biden White House did not invite Hungary, and they did not invite Turkey, of course. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's announcement last week that the country would begin ratifying Finland's membership in NATO, but not Sweden's, likely contributed to the decision to leave it off the list for a second time. While Erdogan has not ruled out admitting Sweden to the military alliance, he stressed that Stockholm's refusal to turn over more than 210 alleged terrorists to Turkish custody was a deal breaker. So they punished Turkey by not inviting them to the Democracy Summit because Turkey has not yet, according to the Biden White House, has not yet ratified Sweden's entry into Finland. So that's the punishment that Turkey is getting. They're not invited to Biden's virtual Democracy Summit. I'm sure Erdogan is crying right now. I'm sure this is keeping Erdogan up at night. Anyway, Hungary, which Biden memorably denounced as totalitarian in 2020, has fallen into disfavor among NATO allies for its refusal to support the strictest sanctions the EU has attempted to deploy against the Russian oil and gas industry. With about 80% of its natural gas coming from Russia, Budapest has repeatedly pointed out that an embargo would hurt Hungary and other European nations much more than it would punish Moscow for the conflict in Ukraine. So Hungary is being punished because it refuses to destroy itself. That's why Hungary is not invited to Biden's virtual democracy summit. I'm sure Orban is crying. I'm sure Orban is unable to sleep because he hasn't been invited to Biden's democracy summit. And Hungary's not being invited because they don't want to destroy their economy by placing sanctions on Russian oil and gas and uranium and stuff like this. Destroy your economy and then we'll invite you to Biden's democracy summit. One of the main talking points in the Biden summit was, of course, Ukraine, and they wanted to pass a resolution condemning Russia. And from what I understand, they couldn't get Mexico and India. I believe Mexico, India, and another country would not sign off on this resolution to condemn Russia and to support Ukraine. Even in Biden's own democracy summit, he couldn't get a couple of countries to sign off on his silly resolution, a resolution condemning Russia from the democracy summit, the video Zoom called democracy summit, of which Ukraine and Zelensky, I'm sure, took part in, calling Ukraine a democracy and human rights, a champion of human rights, Zelensky. Oh, man. Zelensky right now is bullying, evicting, arresting Orthodox priests, and he's shutting down churches and stealing icons and religious artifacts from churches. And this is the champion of human rights and democracy. A coup d'etat government is a democracy. Thank you, Joe Biden, for inviting me to your virtual summit. And I just want to tell everyone in attendance on this virtual summit to give me money. Give me money. I want to buy a home in all of your countries. In all of your countries, I want to buy a home. So give me money. What a joke this Biden White House has become, continues to be. What a freaking joke. So real quick, that is one of my cloud worlds, by the way. Real quick, before I forget, the Restrict Act, which is called the Ban TikTok Act, which has nothing to do with banning TikTok. A lot of people are talking about this act. I'm not going to get into it. It's a terrible act. It's an act that will put all of the power, the internet and the censorship power, into the hands of Joe Bidenopoulos. And now a lot of analysts are talking about it, and they're talking about how terrible this act is. But I'm going to put a link down below to a video, a live stream on Viva Frei's channel, Viva Frei and Robert Barnes, and they called this act out. They knew what this act was all about like a week or two ago. They saw the sham TikTok hearings for what they were, which was just a cover to get the U.S. government, Congress, and the Biden White House to enact this Restrict Act, this Restrict Law. I believe it's 686, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure what the number of this law is, but they called it out like a week or two ago, and they said this is all a sham. What this is really about is putting more power, putting absolute power into the hands of the executive, which is the Biden White House. So the Biden White House would pretty much control the internet if this law gets passed by Congress. So a lot of people are talking about it. I just wanted to mention it here on this channel. And now let's do our final clown worlds. I think I have clown worlds that I want to talk about. Yes, I do. I have two clown worlds. The first one is a tweet from Dmitry Polyansky, who is the representative for Russia in the United Nations. He put out this tweet saying, one of our partners shared with us this photo made during one of the recent UN meetings. It turns out the Ukrainian delegation is fighting everything Russian, listening to Russian interpretation. What a zrada, betrayal in Ukrainian. Zrada, I didn't know that. But yeah, you can see the photo of the translation, the audio translation for the Ukraine delegation. I guess this is the Ukraine delegation. And the language is Russian. Of course it is. They all speak Russian. From what I understand, Zelensky's Ukrainian is pretty bad. This is from my understanding. And Zelensky, his native language is Russian. He thinks Russian. He speaks His natural language when he speaks is Russian. This is my understanding of Zelensky. And he only recently learned to speak Ukrainian, or at least to speak business, professional Ukrainian. So that tells you a lot about this conflict, this proxy war. And finally, we have Zelensky, who is inviting Xi Jinping to Kiev. And so Zelensky, he gave this AP interview on the train to Kiev the other day. I talked about this in my video yesterday, and he told the AP reporter that he is waiting for Xi Jinping to visit him in Kiev. He said, "We are ready to see him. I want to talk to him." The only problem is that Xi Jinping is not picking up the phone. That is Zelensky's problem. "We are ready to see him," Zelensky said in an interview with the Associated Press that was published on Wednesday. "I want to speak with him. I had contact with him before the full-scale war, but during all this year, more than 1 year, I didn't have. Please, Xi Jinping, call me, please. Here's my number. Call me, maybe." Anyway, that's the cloud world. Zelensky is still trying to get a meeting with Xi Jinping. What are the chances that Xi Jinping goes to Kiev to meet with Zelensky? What are those chances? I place them at zero, but who knows? Who knows in this crazy world? Who knows? Anyway, that's the video, everybody. We are on Rockfin, Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, and Telegram. Go to the Duran.locals.com and go to the Duran shop. 10% off. Use the code GOODDAY. Coming to you from Belgrade, wearing my Duran Portugal long sleeve shirt. Take care.